vaccine disinformation is running rampant all across the internet. And there have been some who have suggested that Section 230, which has shielded platforms like yourself from any liability for posting inaccurate and wild content, should be reformed in some way. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think it should be reformed. It's 25 years old. It's not surprising that it's starting to sort of show its age.
So what should the new Section 230 look like?
Well, in our view at Facebook, what would make sense would be a reform of Section 230, which in effect says the following: says to big platforms like YouTube and TikTok and Twitter and Facebook, look, you guys have got to show us, in other words, us, the American people, through their legislators and through perhaps a dedicated regulator that would need to be established for this purpose. You've got to show us that you've got proper systems to coherently monitor what's on your platform, to act in pursuit of the standards which you have, setting out what is and what is not allowed on your platform. You've got to do that transparently and accountably. And if you don't do that properly, then the immunity, or the immunity from liability, the content liability that you enjoy under Section 230, could be taken away from you. In other words, to make that immunity from content liability conditional on having the standards, the processes and systems in place to properly moderate content on our platforms. I think that would strike the right balance between putting the responsibility on the platforms to have the systems in place without getting into what I think would be very, very perilous territory, which is having legislators sort of line by line deciding what kind of adjective, adverb and content they individually like. No one wants that.
So that's a long-term strategy. But in the short term, President Biden has said that Facebook is killing people because of vaccine disinformation. What are you going to do?
Well, to be fair to President Biden, I think he sort of said that he wasn't saying, he clarified his remarks and said that
it's true. Yes.
Well, sure. But I've had subsequent meetings with members of the administration. We have ongoing meetings with the administration, as we do with governments around the world, to explain what we do to ensure that people who use our services have access to authoritative information about COVID. We have a COVID information center, which over 2 billion people around the world have used. And it's not as if there's a sort of inactivity. Facebook alone has removed, I think, around 86 million pieces of COVID misinformation, which we judge would be damaging.
How big a universe of misinformation?
Well, you can measure the outcome. So what we measure, and we have surveys which we do with universities like the Carnegie Mellon University. It's the largest survey of its kind anywhere in the world. Millions of people have replied, explaining what they think about COVID information online and so on. And we've seen that since January, there's been a 15% decline in vaccine hesitancy amongst the millions of Americans who use Facebook. And it now around 85% of American Facebook users actually accept and believe in vaccines. So we're seeing actually measurable steps in the right direction. We have labeled around 167 million pieces of COVID content because we think, or our fact checkers rather, think that they are inaccurate. So we can always try and do more. We must always try and do more. We cannot eliminate people's right in a free society to express reservations about how the pandemic has been conducted, not least, by the way, because scientific consensus changes. You'll remember, for instance, Facebook used to remove claims that COVID was human-made. Then the scientific consensus shifted and said, well, maybe it is. And then if we had to shift with that. So, it isn't a static line, and we constantly consult with experts and scientists to try and draw the line in the right place.